All right, I can go? You guys can hear me? Yeah, all right. Welcome everyone. Thanks you for attending this talk. I am going to start with something that maybe sounds controversial, but I'll try to prove to you that it is actually incontrovertibly true. So we spend collectively, all the organizations that come here, et cetera, a tremendous amount of money and time on governance, right? Whether you're using Elation or Calibra or Atlan, you've got, or Informatica, you're doing things to identify where your PII data is, you're getting definitions and glossary terms and defining KPIs, and all of this work is being done in tracing lineage. And yet fundamentally, if we look at the consumption of that information and the value that it generates within the enterprise, we're reaching just this really tiny potential of what that could actually achieve. And the experience for most of our users in consuming BI within the enterprise is fundamentally an ungoverned experience. Right? So why do I say that? Well, because as a BI consumer, in most enterprises, if I'm consuming the data, I don't really have classification information about what I'm looking at. The classification information about the fact that this is restricted or internal use only or it contains PII data, that is buried inside of the data catalog, and it's not usually visible to me in any kind of consistent way at the point of consumption, right? When as a user looking at the content. So I don't necessarily know that, hey, this is restricted, and so I need to make sure I don't share it broadly within the organization. I make sure I don't share it externally, etc. Similarly, quality is sort of a mystery to most users, right? We spend all of this time, maybe we've invested in Informatica or Monte Carlo, you've got your own scripts, whatever it is, you've got some kind of data quality or learning infrastructure in place to let analysts know that there's a data issue. But, which is great, right? Somebody can go and try to fix that. But during that entire time, as somebody's investigating the issue and resolving it, there are people using dashboards based on that poor quality data, and they have no idea that there's a quality issue unless they're looking at numbers that are bogus, in which case they're, getting on the phone or sending nasty emails, and that's only that. So your users become the data quality, their own data quality experts. So the fact that that's absent from the consumption experience is a fundamental breakdown in governance, right? And then if you look even more broadly across the BI as a whole, and you ask the question, how are most organizations doing in optimizing BI tool usage and resources? Are we doing a good job in making sure that you're not building duplicate content, there's no overlapping content, that you've got a clean environment. There as well, I would say in most organizations, if you take a sober look at it, you wouldn't give it a passing grade, right? I said yesterday that people that, just as you're sitting here today, if you're part of a large organization, I bet at this very moment there's some analyst in your organization going into Tableau or Power BI or Click or whatever tools you're using, and they are building a new dashboard, and that dashboard that they're building is very similar to some existing dashboard that's there, but they just don't know about it. Maybe it's not built by analysts in their team, maybe it was built by somebody who left the company a few months ago, who knows? But they're not leveraging that knowledge, and then at the end of the day, what's going to happen? They're going to build and they're going to release something that is largely similar to something already exists, but not exactly, which means the numbers are not going to exactly match. And then they're going to be 2 queries against the database running all the time, so you've got to have double your usage on Snowflake or Databricks or whatever you're using, so it's incredibly resources are being wasted on that front. And for the user consuming this, it's a confusing experience. I've got 2 dashboards, they don't tell me exactly the same thing, but they're close. Which one do I use? I don't know, right? So that essentially, that lack of governance is a fundamental problem at the BI stack, and I think we have to address it if we are going to have well-governed environments. So, looking at that experience, the current state, right? If you're a consumer of BI in a medium or larger organization, you usually have multiple places where you're going to get information. Oftentimes there's multiple BI tools. And then there's also user-generated content. There are the PDFs that people are creating, Excels on shared drive, SharePoint, and it's a kind of an incoherent experience, right? Any governance that does exist is siloed within each of those tools, so the consumption is not consistent. I need to remember, is this a Power BI report? Oh, we just switched this thing to Tableau. No, let me go look at that. So it's just not a good experience. And there's no way to really govern experience if it's disjointed in this way, right? So that's the key. A disjointed experience, by definition, cannot be effectively governed. So, one of our premises is that in order to govern the experience, you have to, it's not advancing. There we go. You have to have a governed space for consuming analytics. So that's sort of the ground level, right? That's where you have to start. So you must have some place, whether you use a technology like ours, whether you build something on your own, whatever it is, you need to have a portal or a catalog or some place where you are in fact pushing only the content that users should be consuming. You're doing it in a persona-based process, and you're doing it in a way that provides a coherent and consistent experience for your users, right? So it shouldn't be any different whether I'm using Power BI or Tableau or Click. Sure, the slight nuances of behavior of the visualization might be different, but the overarching experience of how I'm consuming it, do I get the right context? Do I know if there's a data quality issue? Do I have glossary information? Am I sure that this is certified and correct information? That should be consistent across the board, right? So unifying that, and that requires a governed space. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll call a BI portal. So, let's talk about how do you achieve that. And again, irrespective of what tech stack you're using, there are a set of steps that you need to do to really deploy this, and I'll kind of give you a sense of that, right? So the first step, you have to connect to everything that you have that's being consumed by your users. Now that includes traditional BI tools, it includes any SaaS products that are delivering analytics, it includes SharePoint content, not everything in SharePoint, but the things that are broadly consumed. It probably includes some things in your shared drive, if there's, because let's face it, as hard as we try, we can't get 100% away from Excel, right? It's out there, and we have to live. So you connect to everything. You need a plug-in infrastructure that brings all that metadata in, so you know what you have. Then, very importantly, you've got to do this BI ops layer, right? You've got to go through this huge galaxy of stuff, of which much of it is duplicative, much of it might be obsolete, right, redundant, etc., unused, and you've got to be able to identify and filter out the things that you actually want to publish, right, and have some kind of process to do that. And then you want to make sure, if you do have a data catalog, if you have something that defines, let's say, key terms at a database level, identifies with the PI data, etc. You want to be able to integrate with that and sync with that, so that you can bring all that information in and enrich the visualization experience based on those dashboards. So if a dashboard is consuming it's consuming PI data, you know about that. If a dashboard has is showing sales, well, you can have and you have a definition of what sales means in your data catalog. You want to be able to weave that together and deliver it in the consumption experience, so your user knows, okay, this sales applies to retail sales in this dashboard, but not sales that are going through our online channel, or whatever that is, right? So it's consistent definition. And oh, by the way, what are other dashboards that are out there that are also using that same definition? So once you've got that, now you can really bubble up those things that you want to make accessible via a catalog, right? So here you're really at the starting gate from a user perspective. So you've cataloged everything from all your different sources, and you've bubbled up into the catalog, make it accessible via search, and you've secured it, obviously, with your security model. So security has to either be inherited from your BI tool directly or controlled through Active Directory and LDAP, right? But you do not want to have this governed environment require a whole new security layer. It has to just be inherited, but it's very important that it be integrated with security. So that now you've got that catalog. So now you've got to deliver it through a number of different delivery mechanisms, right? So, in our environment, this is based on our ecosystem. We have something called Concierge, which is sort of the LLM-based search capability for this. Users might want to access it through collaborative tools like Microsoft Teams or Slack, or your own chatbots. But then, of course, the more traditional is important as well. At a persona-based level, I should be able to come in, and I should be able to, based on my job function, find things, whether I'm online, through my desktop, desktop, whether I'm on mobile, on a tablet, on all the, have the things that matter to me. Say I want to subscribe for these things, get them via email. So make it as accessible in a ubiquitous way to users as possible. Again, governed by security, but also with some degree of discoverability. This is very important, right? So I, as a user, if I don't know that something exists, then that's a problem. Even if I don't have access to it, there's a lot of things that I should probably know that they exist, so I can request access to them. So you want to classify content here that gets published into the catalog based on whether they're things that these are highly sensitive, where I shouldn't even know if they don't exist. Maybe HR type data, things like that. But other things that should be discoverable to users in the event that they maybe are not aware of them, and then they have some mechanism where it goes through access request process to get access. All right, so let's talk about, just by way of example, I'll give you a sense of what does some of these things look like in the Metric Insights application. So you can kind of visualize at least one implementation of this kind of a governed environment via BI portal, right? So this is how we represent the catalog, right? So in this case, you can see on the left-hand side, you've got your content, you've got folders and categories, the things are organized into based on who I am as a user. I might see different categories or folders of content, and then everything in our catalog we represent either as a list, or in this particular case as these tiles, these little cards, where you can see a visualization that represents something, because we're visual people, right? It gives us visual memory as to what I'm looking for with a name. What kind of object it is. Click in your Tableau and your Power BI content can be right next to each other. We collect the thumbnails so you can get an actual picture. And if it was something either very sensitive or something was discoverable to me, I would see a little lock and I would see a fuzzy image, right? So there's various ways to kind of have this experience work at that level as well. And you can see we also have some KPIs and other things there as well. So this is your catalog. It's all, and then you've got the ability to have everything organized there. You should be able to, when you click on one of those objects, see the context that lets you understand what it is you're looking at, right? So here you see I get a preview image. And then on the right-hand side, I've got this information that tells me here's what enterprise KPIs are in this thing, right? So this measures sales and cost and profit and units. And if I were to click on sales or one of those things, I could see the glossary terms and their definitions, right? So I can kind of drill down from here, irrespective of what I'm consuming here, understand what KPIs are involved in this, understand those definitions, have access to that wealth of information that would otherwise be locked away in a data catalog that, if you have a data catalog, but it would be locked away in a data catalog that only a small number of users would use and not your business users. And then ownership, of course, description, other information. I've got information for Calibra relation, does it have PII data, whatever other things you've got. So give me the context so I know, is this the thing I want to use, right? And then of course, if I click into it, I'm going to be in the portal, I would have it in an iframe and I'd be able to consume it, so I don't have to leave the portal to consume it. And then the idea is that there's search and discovery experience and the catalog experience. I should be able to search for it wherever I am, right? So that same experience, governed by the security model, in a governed environment, whether I'm in Slack or Teams, I should be able to search for content and get that and click to it and get to find it. On my mobile, I should be able to do that, on my tablet, or through the desktop to doing a search experience. So this is kind of a quick run through that we'll go through, but yeah, you get the idea. So one place, search and consistent. And then if it's discoverable, right? If I click on something that has been set to be discoverable, I should get an access denied message because I don't have access to see it. I should get some metadata so I know a little bit about what it is, who owns it, etc. And there should be some way for me to request access. So typically in enterprises, this might be directly take you into a ServiceNow flow, right, or something of that nature, where it goes in and then the request is made to the owner or something like that, then they can authorize it, and then automatically you would get access to it and get notified by it. But some mechanism is required, and this allows you to ensure that you minimize the amount of overlap that gets created by virtue of people just not realizing something exists, and then they go and they ask somebody else to create it, and that wastes a huge amount of resources and effort, right? And then the other part of it is a customized user experience. So from a user perspective, once I've got all this content, I should be able to use them as Lego blocks and build these different experiences. For example, as a executive, I might not want to start with I might want to start with high-level KPIs that I've extracted from all the different dashboards that are out there, and then drill down from there into the detail. And I'm not going to. This is just a bunch of examples. If you're interested, we have a booth over there. You can come visit us, and we'll give you a bunch of examples so you can get more ideas of different things you can do. All right. And then content publishing, right? So if you're going to have a managed environment, in one way or another, you need to have a content publishing workflow for putting things in. Not everything that somebody creates as a developer in your Power BI or Tableau environment should be bubbled up to the portal, right? And there should be some gates that it has to go in. Now, this is a balancing act. You have to do this very carefully, because any kind of a publishing process, if it requires too many gates, if it's too onerous, you won't be able to get adoption within your organization, and that's a problem. But if you can create sort of a Kanban style, different stage environment where maybe the content initially gets pulled in and synchronized automatically into a staging area, and then a developer or a business person just can come in with a few clicks, add additional metadata that you might want to have them supplement as a standard, and then push it into production, certify it. Then that could be very well executed. And it can be very much of a light touch process that still ensures that a minimum amount of governance exists. That if I certify something, I've checked that it's consistent with the other things that are in the catalog. That if I say that everything has to have certain data classification, if maybe that isn't coming from your data catalog, that it's coming through the workflow as it's defined. And then engagement is very important. So if it's a governed environment, by definition, it's not a one shot and you're done, right? On day one, you've identified the content you want to bring in, you publish it, then you need to be able to track that usage. You need to track it over time, understand how is engagement changing over time for your content, and then as the content publisher, based on feedback you get from the users, you need to be able to collect feedback as well. Then you can refine that content and make sure that what's kept in the portal continues to be relevant. So tracking things like what's most popular, what's increasing or decreasing in popularity, that's critical for a BI portal as you're tracking the engagement, as well as having that mechanism to collect and distribute feedback on content. And then this is just an example we talked about earlier, the whole the BI ops layer, which we said is critically important in the early stages, right? As you're getting content ready for publishing, right? You want to be able to see, what are the potential duplicates that I have out there, right? And if I, as an analyst, start doing what I just described before, I'm creating some content, I'm getting it ready to be published. There should be a system behind the scenes that looks and says, geez, based on lineage here, based on the tables and columns that this dashboard's using and the key names and the key metadata that's there, it looks like there's a really big overlap between this and something that already exists, or maybe multiple things that already exist, and notifying me, reaching out to me and telling me, so that I know proactively that maybe I should reach out to this other analyst or go look at that content or see if there's actual overlap. Maybe I should be using that as a starting point or consolidating, and keeping me from publishing content where there's clearly going to be an overlap, where I'm basically wasting precious resources and creating confusion for your users. So having some way to vet that, not only for an initial process when you publish content, but also for as an ongoing basis, to be able to make sure that you're keeping the environment clean, that it's like a museum, right? If you think about your BI portal, your catalog, it should be like a museum rather than like an overgrown forest, right? Where everything has its place and it's organized and it's relevant to your users. All right, so that's what I have. So I'll open it up if there's anybody have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. I don't know, there should be somebody with a mic coming out there. Oops, yeah, we'll put this on.
Hi, thanks a lot.
Hello.
Just curious about how the BI ops layer. There are different versions of that in different organizations, but how does one keep that fresh, given the constant change that's happening, and they might be distributed across lots of different people?
Yeah, so I think you bring up a really great point in that, and we didn't really talk about this, but really all of the things we talked about here in a large organization has to be distributed. You can't possibly have a centralized team that's managing all that. So what we typically find is that you've got a center of excellence team, like a centralized team, and they set the guardrails. So we looked earlier, for example, at this, let's see if I can go back to this, pointing the wrong thing here. At the workflow, right? So you might have a centralized team that sets what the standards are for the workflows here. Here's the kind of information I need to keep, and then the actual publishing process gets distributed out. So the way that for example, might work is when there's new content, each of the different groups is responsible for coming in and publishing their content to the portal. Now there has to be the administration, there has to be the overall management sort of mandate or buy-in from the top that says governance is important, and therefore we will make sure if your content is going to be consumed broadly by users, it needs to be consumed through the portal, right? That's important. And the Center of Excellence does some high-level monitoring through reporting to be able to say, oh, here's the teams that maybe don't look like they're in compliance, and goes and nudges them. So that's sort of that's still required, right? To get, especially initially, get people to train themselves to do something different. But if it's a light touch, there shouldn't be much complaining. If you're showing your analysts that this is just a few clicks and you're done. And then, if there are reports of exceptions, that's important. And then on the duplicate detection, the same idea, right? What you want to do is you don't want all those exceptions coming to some central person administrator. How can they possibly manage it? What you want is, as soon as an asset looks like it's showed up in the early stages of the workflow, and there's a significant overlap between that and something that's already there in the metadata, you want notification going to that user. So that they are aware of it, and then the COE is just monitoring overall compliance across the board, right? To see if are there certain groups that need a little training or kind of intervention because they're not adhering to the standard. That was a really good question. Yes, ma'am.
Just to follow up on that, this distributed team, would you include the business in that, or would it be other data teams?
Yeah, so it depends on the content. Like in this workflow that we're talking about here, for example, I think it really depends on the kinds of content that they're publishing. So for example, if those are assets that team is publishing that generally are consumed by small parts of the organization, they don't represent a high level of risk, then it might just be fine for them to be responsible for doing their own publishing on their own. If you're talking about financial reports that are being reviewed by the board, right, on the other extreme of that, then that should be a multi-stage process where maybe every month the thing gets decertified, it gets placed in the beginning of the process, then you've got the business taking a look at it, maybe you've got the data governance team taking a look at it, you've got multiple stakeholders moving it through this to a certification. So it's not a one size fits all. You probably have a set, collection of different workflows, and then you attach by category, based on the type of content, what category it's going into. It's lined up to the right workflow that's appropriate. Yeah, great question. Are there any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for joining. Thank you.